changing people's minds, it's about changing interactions, and it's really about, can you design institutional system approaches that push against the embedded bias? It's a fascinating field for us to be creative and try to meet the moment around where can people still lean into this, as you say, versus pull back. Who am I doing this for?
Yes, yes, having that personal anchor is so important, right? Like that thing that just brings you back to your North Star.
And so for me, I think the source is, I just care a lot about people being treated with respect, fairness, care, having great opportunities in life.
Today, we are diving into the Inclusive Leader in You. This is a brand new program that we are so excited to have here at Open Sesame from our incredible friends at SunShower Learning. I want to give a big shout out to Joe, Lesko, Gina. We are so excited. You are the real MVPs of the work that we do here. I'm Lisa Wisner. My pronouns are she, they, and y'all. And I'm Open Sesame's Enterprise Curator of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I am so excited to introduce our speaker today, who is going to be Greg Gale. Greg, we are so excited that you're here. Nice to see you. We're so glad
Nice
that
to
you're
see you,
here.
Lisa.
Yeah, this session today was really pitched as an opportunity for us to provide the audience with some really actionable insights, especially considering the space that we are in today in our world, right? We want to be able to learn more about how to build authentic connections, embrace inclusion, and we feel like you are the person to give these answers for us. So before I start, drilling you with a bunch of questions, because we did decide this was going to be a somewhat of a fireside chat. We're going to get real here, Greg. I do want to mention for you all, just to give you a little bit of a foundation, Greg is truly a trailblazer when it comes to inclusive leadership. And Greg is the founder of Inside Out Consulting. Say that 3 times fast. Inside Out Consulting, y'all, with decades of experience, with a standout career, y'all, as Vice President and Director of DEI at Liberty Mutual Insurance. Greg has inspired countless leaders to embrace DEI and weave it into their organizations. Now, I am so thrilled to have Greg here because Greg has collaborated with one of my favorite publishers, which is SunShower Learning, and has actually launched a series of courses in our catalog that we're going to be going through that are really made for this space that we're in right now, a space where we really need to lean in even harder into our inclusivity, into our efforts to bring everyone together. And I feel like the work that Greg has done is truly a reflection of maybe the vision that Greg has for the world that we have today. So let's in the chat give a warm welcome to Greg as Greg says hello to everyone. Welcome.
Hello, Lisa and everyone. I'm very happy to be here and love this forum. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited you're here. So let's go ahead and just start off the bat. I'm just going to stop my share and we're just going to start off with just, really leaning into this fireside chat. I have my notepad here. I have my pen. I am ready to take notes. And so I just want to, ask you the first question being, you've been a force in the diversity, equity, inclusion world, and you're really well known. A lot of people may know you in the audience today. So can you tell us a little bit about, knowing the state of the world we're in today, what's keeping you inspired? What's keeping you energized? Why do you think it's important to continue this work?
Oh, Lisa, what a great question. I feel like, I'm not your usual suspect to be in DEI. Often when I show people say, this guy, because I am a straight, white, upper middle class male, but I've been, I think, doing this work since childhood on one level around fairness. They talk about how in the Catalyst report about gender equity says white men who lean into this tend to have experience of fair play as children. They want things to be more fair. And I think that's how I started and then ended up at Liberty Mutual. And so for me, it's a lifelong endeavor, no option to off ramp. And we've got some headwinds, and in some ways it can make us even better at what we're trying to do. So I'm thankful to keep pushing at this time.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a personal thing to you, right? Like you coming into this space, like you mentioned, you're the unlikely suspect, right? To be in this space. So it's really great to hear that. But I want to hear a little bit more about, your personal approach to this. I want to hear about maybe what lights your fire when it comes to DEI. I know what lights my fire. It's all the injustices that I see. So I'm curious about what's your personal approach, or maybe a secret sauce you have for us in regards to DEI.
I wish I could see where all the audience members are serving in this space, because there's usually a very wide spectrum. And when I think about it, Lisa, I came in and remain committed through I would say, a social justice lens, and that's the origins of DEI are in that tradition. And I think over my career, as I've helped run teams and helped organizations get better, I've also, of course, recognized how much DEI makes us all better together. So when you go from, pure social justice, racial equity, all types of equity, to trying to make companies better, it's quite an adventure to be capable across that continuum. And so for me, I think the source is I just care a lot about people being treated with respect, fairness, care, having great opportunities in life. And I find it very intriguing to how to bring that in and thread that through in companies and nonprofits where I worked. Because of course, it's about changing people's minds. It's about changing interactions. And it's really about, can you design institutional system approaches that push against the embedded bias? So it's a fascinating field for us to be creative and try to meet the moment around where can people still lean into this, as you say, versus pull back.
Yes, and I really like how you just kind of talked about how important it is to lean in, right? And but even more than leaning in, for me, I just feel like, part of my DEI story has to do with my upbringing and then even some situations that have happened, right? So I'm even more curious. I want to go another layer deeper, Greg. Okay, let's peel that onion a little bit. Why DEI? How did you get into DEI? Tell us about maybe your career journey that landed you at DEI.
Yeah, Lisa. I mean, it's funny, when you share about having had experiences probably of exclusion or being mistreated. I grew up in a wealthy New England environment, multi-generational, college educated folks, Ivy League. And my entry was through the superiority complex that's part of being in that group versus, what's often thrust upon other people is the reinforcement of their inferiority complex. So when I grew up in an environment where superiority was in the water, it never sat right with me because I recognize people are fundamentally humans and deserve respect. And so I think that started so early that I did not appreciate the languaging and the mistreatment sometimes I saw my family doing out of habit. And it took me, in the most recent part of my career, all the way to a Fortune 100 company to say, okay, there's 50,000 people here, mostly run by guys who look like me at the top of the house, lots more diversity lower in the system, which is often true. How do we try to increase the fairness and make sure it's results oriented too, so that people who are waking up worrying about the bottom line, the P&L, actually see how this helps them lift on their work while they try to become better at being more inclusive.
Yeah, and I really like how you said, you were being observant, right? You were hearing, you were seeing, and it was impacting you, I guess, emotionally, right? So then you felt like it was your work to do, right? To create that space. And I also want to echo one of our attendees says, everyone is a DEI person, in my opinion. Yes, right? And even when I think about the people who may not be interested in learning more about DEI and are opposed to the concept of DEI, I feel like they are practicing DEI by doing exactly that, right? I feel like it's kind of like, yeah, you're saying exactly what we're saying, which is what you want to be represented. You want your voice to be heard. And I know that you've worked with so many leaders and you've built DEIB teams from the ground up. It's been really impressive to kind of read and learn more about the work that you've done. So tell us, what trends are you noticing? You've had a breadth of experience in this. So what trends are you noticing right now? What's exciting you? Let's be real, tell us what's keeping you up
Yeah.
at night.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, it's funny. The other week, I thought if I had to encapsulate what I see happening, is there are three responses from institutions. First is, oh, good, there's an off ramp. We were only doing this for social pressure. This company's out. That organization cuts the budget. Get rid of your DEI folks. So that's like, to me, the very that was the performative DEI organizations that were essentially in it because of the negative social pressure or repercussion. So I think if that is one group, I don't really focus on that group because that work is hard because you're not really lifting that much in there. The middle group is, I think, institutions that have been doing this and are now a little shaken on the play, feeling ambivalent, scared of legal repercussion, wondering about investment in this space, and yet still in it. And so I think that's a really important target audience of how do we help them recognize the next phase of this can be very powerful. And yeah, there's some headwinds and blockers going on that we have to not fall away from out of fear, but also, go forward. Then I think of the third group, which is probably, and so I don't know percentages here, but it's very intriguing. Then there's the groups that say, I mean, we're in. I'm hearing this from my clients who say, oh, our board just reaffirmed we're in. Our CEO just reaffirmed, no question. And even in those institutions, I do hear the board saying we're in, and to the DEI folks, DEIB folks, um, what do we need to be doing that might be different based on the social pressure against this type of field? So I tend to think in those three groups and try to speak to people in the group that they are probably experiencing based on their institution.
I love it. So can you tell us those groups again? It was go ahead.
Happy to off ramp. Woo, got a reason to
Yes.
get
We
out.
gotta leave. Uh-huh.
In but concerned or ambivalent or wondering where's this going, and then all in. And even the all in group is saying, wow, there's a lot to attend to here relative to the legal risk or how we're going to keep, to your point, Lisa, keep all people in this conversation,
Mhm.
because there's a lot more permission, I'm noticing, for more voicing of the resistant point of view. And
Mhm.
companies and institutions need to be able to handle, how do we actually dialogue about what's foundational in this that lifts all boats?
Mhm.
Because it's a more rigorous conversation than when people felt a little bit like you can't say anything about this or you
Mhm.
be branded XYZ.
Yeah. And sometimes we have performative groups and senior leaders who are pretending to be all in, but they're sort of like their actions are not speaking like their words. And so my next question to you is really about tackling senior leaders, right? And
Mhm.
you brought this up, so I'm not going to say I brought it up, especially white male leaders, right? So just thinking about getting them on board, because that is the majority of what we look at when we see leadership, right? I always like to play that, that unconscious bias, game where you're just like, think of a CEO, and most people think of a Greg Gale, right? Think of a Greg Gale, right? Are they thinking of a black woman? Most of the time
Mhm.
they're not, right? And those are the biases that we're raised in, and it's not easy, right? So what do you think, in terms of the work that you do, knowing that you are a DEIB leader, what's your magic formula for making that happen? How do you bring those senior leaders who are mostly white male, how do you bring them to the table and hold them accountable?
Yeah, Lisa, well, I'll tell you a funny story. When I worked in a company, my boss was a black woman, and I said, essentially, I'm a Trojan horse with you and for you, in that I grew up with these guys. And it's not hard for me to relate to them authentically because they're like my cousins, my uncles, my brothers, my friends. Um, and so I appreciate attempting to help them enter this in a different way. So I have that privilege of being from that group. And then I think I've found that the thing, if you want to bring them in, you can't come at them from a deficit blame shame point of view. Because if you think about it, what human likes to be treated that way? And what response, if you think about yourself or others, if you feel dishonored or disrespected or made to seem like you have a mean spirit or are not doing the right thing, usually there's a self-protection. So my feeling usually is, and usually I try to do it one-on-one, say to a leader I'm meeting, what do you think your personal connection is to DEI? And very often they'll say something like, oh, it's the right thing to do for others. Or, oh, one guy said to me, I've just lived a very fortunate, privileged life. I said, well, that may be true, but that's not necessarily your connection to what we're talking about. So where have you personally ever experienced being one down? Um, Tell me about that. Most people will have a story about that. And I'll give you a hilarious story. I was working in England with investment bankers. And this is going to sound funny, but there was a younger guy who had a little more panache than the older, investment guys. And he said, well, I wore yellow socks at one point and I was completely mocked. So I just now only wear black socks. And it sounds silly, but I said, what would that feel like? He said, oh man, I couldn't be myself. I got self-conscious. I said, okay, that's what we're talking about. How might that be for others who carry more identifiers than their socks? So I
Love.
usually try to make it personal. And if someone
Mhm.
can't find anything about their own one down experience, I often say, well, how about your loved ones? who do you know who is being one downed or has been? And people will, one man said to me, gosh, if I think about it, my mother was actually the valedictorian of her high school class, smarter than my father, but my father was the breadwinner businessman. My mom raised the kids. And I don't think she ever had a chance to share the level of talent she had. And I think that was hard for her. And he said, I don't really want that to be true anymore. I want women on my team who have a
Mhm.
shot at bringing their brilliance. So that's an example of him having to proxy in a little bit, but it's real. So then I say to him, okay, this is what we're talking about. You're in.
Yeah.
And that's a more enduring source of energy than what am I supposed to do not to get in trouble? Who am I
Uh-huh.
who am I doing this for?
Yes, yes, having that personal anchor is so important, right? That thing that just brings you back to your North Star. And I want to echo exactly what you said, Yvonne mentioned, right? There are those who want to be in, but they are pressures to stop them. Those pressures are threats to their job, security, economic threats, implied threats, overly critical evaluations, right? Making
Wow.
mountains out of molehills. I absolutely love your comment there, Yvonne. Keep it coming. And it actually ties in very perfectly into the thing that I wanted to ask you to do. And this is just in terms of just thinking about how important it is to have people like you in this work, right? Because I feel like I'm tired a little bit. And I feel like, oh my gosh, like again, we have to start from zero because they didn't get it. And so it feels like we're just always trying to prove ourselves, right? It's like you're
Yeah.
just trying to prove your existence and why it's important for you to have a space. So
Hmm.
what would you say to other white male leaders? What would your message be to them and asking them to be bold in these days and move into the space of inclusive leadership?
Wow, Lisa. Well, it's funny. It's hard for me to see in your face and hear that fatigue. And here we go back 4 steps to go forward a step. And I don't relate to the world that way because it's not been my experience, but I empathize with that. And I've also been thinking how really unfair and absurd it is to say, okay, we have one role. We're going to put a person of color there. We're going to ask them to like shift this environment, get people from the majority racial group to like change their point of view. It's just like absurd not to have more partnership in that, more budget, more mind share with people who look like me in terms of the company. Um, so I think for men today, I often like to say to them, I'm never going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to be invitational till you say no. And I'm going to just point out some things that I think are true. One is, do you want to be relevant now and in the future as a coworker, team member, and a leader? If you want to be relevant, the world is shifting, diversifying. Do you want to be the kind of person where anybody would love to work with you or work on a team for you? If you do, you have a massive amount to learn about how to have people experience respect across the many types of difference that are in the world now. Um, and I often say to them, you can say you're going to camp out in resistance to this. It may not be your best decision. Because if you're competing, let's say white men mostly compete against each other, sadly, for senior roles. The white man who's leaned in and said, I'm going to become capable of leading with more kinds of people to have high engagement and productivity is a lot better off than the guy who says, oh, I'm glad that thing ended. There was a lot of pressure to DEI. So I usually try to pose it as you really have a choice. And I can't tell you what to do, but I'm not sure you've thought about the ways that you could actually be part of the solution here.
I love that. And so that actually leads me into just sharing a little bit about your Inclusive Leader in You series. I actually have a video to share. I don't know if you know that, but I have a video to share from SunShower Learning, which is just a little bit of a preview of what's to come in regards to the options that you have for us for being inclusive leaders.
Are you ready to become a more effective and inclusive leader?
I want to share one of the most important things you can do to improve your results, and that is to build trusting relationships across differences. Push yourself to notice when you have a misstep. Apologize for it. Commit to building the relationship. Don't give up or pull away. In a changing world, the ability to shift, grow, and meet the demand of the times is critical.
In 3 dynamic modules, Gale shares actionable insights on how to be a more inclusive leader, based on his decades of experience coaching and building cultures of inclusion.
Companies with very diverse employees and inclusive practices outperform the competition. It's a fact.
This transformative course combines instructor-led sessions with relatable scenarios to enhance your leadership skills.
Thomas gave me some room to run. That made a difference.
The team was struggling, and that was on me. I was able to reflect and see how things could have gone better.
Relationships of trust drive results. And the wider and more diverse your circle of trusted relationships, the better your results will be.
Learn how to cultivate inclusive relationships and drive results in this course. You'll gain practical skills for building strong connections and recovering from missteps. So jumpstart your journey with the inclusive leader in you, powered by SunShower Learning.
All right, so now that we've just seen a little bit of a preview of what your course is about, how do you feel about having a course out with SunShower Learning?
Oh, I'm thrilled, Lisa, because I believe this is actually, of course, we all do, a skill set. So sometimes it gets said as like a moral referendum, good person, bad person, or people are like, oh, it's so difficult and so risky, I don't want to play. My feeling is it's a learnable skill to be a more inclusive leader. And I hope to work with SunShower to just say, what are the moves that you make? So you think about whether you're a musician, you're a dancer, you're an athlete, people learn to say, oh, this is a, a riff, this is a way that I kick a ball. And I think sometimes DEI work has been put into domains that don't help people feel they can actively get better or practice. So the course is really designed to say, let's isolate the muscle, work on one thing, not that they're easy, but go practice it in your environment and stay open to learning. To your opening point about this community, just try to keep people in a learning position versus I'm good or bad at this, I'm right or wrong, the world's fair or unfair to me. Those tend to stop people.
They do. I attended a session once with I can't remember the name of the person, but they're a well-known HR executive, and they were mentioning how important it is to stay curious, whether you agree or disagree. At that moment, in the instant, stay curious, wonder, why did this person think that? Why did they have that opinion? Just stay in that curiosity. And that actually sometimes they say leads to the best solutions once you stay curious. So I want to actually ask you about the series that you've created. Absolutely love all the different concepts you have in there. But which part of it really excites you? What is the one thing that you hope people take away from this course?
Well, I've been thinking about your response to it, Lisa, and others, and I think maybe the most common experience people have across all of us is to periodically make mistakes or have misses in a relationship across difference. And I think it's maybe the most practical part of the course is to say, if you're going to increase the quality and intimacy of your relationships, particularly across difference, you are inevitably going to have misses. So get used to it. But what do you do when you have one? People often have a response of, oh, I'm bad. They pull back. They blame the person who raised it to their awareness. They run away. They say, that's it. They go quiet. There's a lot of ways we respond that are not that helpful. So I like to believe that in this course, people could say, oh, okay, you're normalizing the fact I'm going to have misses. That doesn't make me a terrible leader or person. And there's things I have to watch out for what happens in my mind, in my head when I do it. And then what's my action back to someone who I've offended? And sort of just try to turn that into something where you can courageously try again and not give up on relationships that matter to you or that you're trying to grow.
Right. And sometimes in this position of leadership, right, we may feel like, oh, well, that happened yesterday and now it's 8 hours later. I don't want to bring that up again because, oh, now I'm kind of like, but how important is it to acknowledge when a mistake has been made, regardless of the time frame that's been passed?
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying because most people hope to put these in the rearview mirror, myself included. Oh, it takes a deep breath to think that one, if I put that in the rearview mirror, it's not rearview mirror for that person likely. It landed. So I think I'm going to go try to address it. And that even won't be perfect. If you keep saying that I'll do this one thing and it'll be received just right, you're setting yourself up for the next disappointment. Versus if I offend you, Lisa, I come to you and I say, Lisa, I made a comment yesterday. Do you mind telling me how it landed for you? You might say, I didn't even notice your comment. Or, yeah, I'm still feeling angry about that. That's the example of trying to go back and not expect immediate forgiveness or don't go in and sort of self-immolate, I say, like go in and say, Lisa, I'm such a terrible guy, you know, and then that puts it on you to take care of me versus me saying, Lisa, did this land poorly? Can you tell me about it? So I would encourage people, if you can feel it, that you had a negative impact on someone, have the courage to address it, even if that makes you fear there's going to be another struggle spot. Because often working through those from in my own experiences with women, people of color, younger people, transgender folks on my team, those are opportunities for actually building a relationship if you have some degree of willingness and ability to just try to be respectful as you continue on. People often say that, oh, that mistake turned into really getting to know someone better around how we're going to work together.
Isn't that the challenge? Like, I don't think people realize this. Like, the most successful marriages have troubles here and there, right? The most successful relationships have conflict. Like, that's how you build up. That's how you build that resiliency. I'm not trying to say we need to have issues all the time, but it's about understanding that as humans, we're not perfect. We're always going to make mistakes.
Yes.
And it's how do you move through that? How do you be, maybe put that ego aside and step into the other person's perspective? But one point that you made that I want to tap on here was you didn't approach this as coming and saying, I made a mistake. You approached this as a question, right? You stayed curious. You asked, how did this land with you yesterday? It didn't land well with me. How did it land with you? Because that other person's perspective may have been different from yours, right?
Yes. I'll give you an example of that. Earlier in my career, we were an all-white organization working with a lot of young people and families of color in a nonprofit. And we began to diversify our staff by race and class because we were mostly, do-good, wealthy white people. And we hired a Black woman out of corporate who I really liked. And then I got very self-conscious about our environment because I was listening to us and I started to think, oh, I wonder how she would hear what just got said or the thing I said. So I went to her and I said, I'm just curious, is anything that got shared yesterday hard for you? And she said, yeah, it's hard for me to hear about how this organization talks about white women. Because we were often overwhelmed by applicants, white women, and we did end up having kind of a slightly dismissive tone publicly about, oh my gosh, we can't hire any more white women. There's so many white women who do this work. And I thought, listen to that. Like here, I thought our comments were maybe offending her across race. And she picked up another part of the environment that had spoken bias that could have been hard on others. So I thought, oh my, there's why you don't go in and say, I know that I've really screwed up with you. More like, how are you thinking about this environment?
I love it because we all have a different lived experience, right? We don't just because you see me and you imagine you know me and who I am because maybe you can see the color of my skin, maybe you can assume what my gender is or whatever, or you can assume my economic status. Don't make assumptions about people, right?
I love that.
Always ask, stay curious. I love it. I love it. And so as we're ending this interview, I do want to ask you, Greg, let's address the elephant in the room, okay? I just kind of want to get real here, because some people say that DEI actually divides us more than it unites us. So I'm just thinking about your course. I'm thinking about the work that you're doing. You are a well-known leader in this work. So, shouldn't we just treat everybody equally as as we're being told instead of highlighting our differences? What's your take on that?
Oh. Well, my take is that's a very deep question. And it's funny, I have been thinking about some of the ways I may have over participated in calling out difference and microaggressions. And I think about that now. And I certainly see the over indexing in the other direction, which is like, we're all humans, we're all children of God, we're all the same, we're all employees, and that's got serious problems. So I do think the capacity to say, this is my way of trying to do the work is, what is our shared purpose? Why are we here together? Okay, that's our collective mission. We need the best of us, all of us, to make that happen. What are the risks to who's going to be considered in or out in that endeavor? How do we keep watching for those while we respect everybody's ability to contribute? Because I do think that, when I talk about the field coming from social justice, at its most progressive, I would say, the fight for the rights of people who don't look like me has been going on for 250 years. And it's because of progressive push that people have been more included. when that spirit goes really strong in an institution, it does stimulate resistance itself to, aren't we all one in this company? Aren't we all citizens of this? Da, da, da. So I sort of like the pressure to find the spot where all are part of it. And my boss, at Liberty Mutual, she had a brilliant statement, which was like, DEI is about all of us. And that's easy to say, but it certainly doesn't allow people from the racial majority to say, oh, clearly it's not about me. We say, no, it's about all of us. You just got to figure out how it's about you with us. And I think that spirit is what is most effective.
I love it. Oh, let's just keep sprinkling that spirit around. Like we're talking about the Christmas spirit or the holiday spirit. Let's sprinkle that around, right? DEI is about all of us. It's about everyone, right? Everyone is considered when we think about that. And so as we're wrapping up this chat, this fireside chat, hopefully you enjoyed it. I did. Do you have any parting words of wisdom, maybe for leaders or aspiring inclusive leaders today?
Well, I'll close with a story. So I was talking with a former colleague of mine, a Black woman in the South who's just been appointed the chief diversity officer at a healthcare company. And she said it's very hard because she's sitting across from table now with people who she knows because they're vocal on social media and at work with serious negative biased pushback. And she said it's hard to be looked at as the one that they don't value or the one who's like the enemy. And she's got a very generous spirit. And she said, but I count upon circles of safety with my colleagues. She said, with you, and I feel it with her, to stay strong in the work. So my parting words would be, let's find each other. Let's stay together. Because it's very hard work to be out there pushing what we've all been doing for a long time. And without that support, I think, spirit dims. So find each other and cheerlead and pick the right things to push for in this environment.
Yes, let's find each other and be intentional, right? That's what that sounds like. It sounds like pick the thing that maybe is pulling at your heart, the thing that matters to you, the thing that maybe creates more connections with others, right? That shared unified goal. Pick that. Y'all, I want to just give a huge thank you to Greg, Gale for being here. We are going to move into Q&A. And for me personally, I just know that this session was an opportunity for me to ask you the hard questions, Greg. So hopefully these questions were helpful, right, to all of y'all as we were unpacking. And we're going to start off with Pat Tucker, who asks, how do we get through the next 4 years with DEI being politicized and seen as bad?
Wow. I'm in that same question real time, Sean, thinking a lot about it. So to me, it's not to assume all is lost. And I was thinking this week, to me personally, Greg Gale, it was heartening to see the limits of the legal pushback when the court said the Marine Corps, of course, needs to keep advancing and finding talented people of color, men of color, women of color to lead troops. So I like seeing that there's places where the center will be found on these things because it can feel like it's all dropping all of it. I don't think it will. I think each of us locally in our organizations, if we can become the people Lisa said, who are reaching out, searching for the connection, the advancement of the work that's keeping us all in it, we will, institution by institution, help keep it alive. So those are my thoughts, is do the best you can to find the common ground that helps us push forward to the next phase. And all is not lost.
All is not lost. These are like t-shirts. We need t-shirts, y'all. So we can just have a shirt for the day. All is not lost. You can see it right there as I'm talking. Our next question comes from an anonymous attendee. And the question, I'm going to read the question because I actually like how it's worded. It says, hey, Greg, as a white man, how do you handle pushback, if you've ever had it, from non-white groups on working on DEI, both from the perspective of being a white guy working on DEI and also specific pushback you may have gotten from non-white groups on DEI work in general? I found this really hard to balance. And before you answer, Greg, I have to mention to you that part of my work is to book speakers and have these events and make them encouraging. And every now and then I'll get messages from people who are questioning the decisions we're making on who we're having to come on and speak about topics like this. So in full vulnerability, I have to tell you, I got quite a few messages about why is this guy closing out the year? So I have to say that it was such a refreshing opportunity for us to bring the real talk to the I guess you could say I don't want to say the face, but like the position that people feel is at the cost of where we are at right now. So as you're answering that question, I just want you to know that a lot of people are not wanting to ask that question. So I'm glad that it's being brought up right now.
Oh, I appreciate it too. And it's not unfamiliar to me, Lisa. When I was hired into one role, there were a lot of people of color in this space who said, why would you possibly use a role for that guy? This is our space. And the person who hired me, who was a person of color, said, well, we're not going to do this alone. We got to have partnership across difference around gender and race. So I think I don't fault anyone for having that sense of like, oh God, another space where white men are going to be in the lead and getting paid money. And I understand that. I think of it as more, what's your strategy for trying to influence diverse systems, and trying to make space for partnership and the learning that requires to be allied with someone like me. And I think the harder one for me, the one I haven't cracked, is I was in a cab yesterday coming from a client and had a Kenyan black man driver who was talking about his own family splitting currently in this political environment and him dealing with siblings and cousins who, are really pushing for the more conservative point of view. And he and I wrestled with that together, trying to understand where that could come from. So I think it's interesting when I think about it in some ways, like I have one of my best friends is a man who grew up in Jamaica on a subsistence farm and came here and succeeded in the United States way beyond what I've done. And he doesn't really want to be involved in DEI, and I understand why. He's like, yeah, it's your people, you got issues. It's not my problem. And so I've sort of seen a very wide set of responses from, yep, do your work, Greg, to why are you doing this work, Greg? And all I can do is just keep doing what I'm doing and hope that how I treat people makes more people want to partner versus less.
Yes, I agree with you because it's not about like who is doing the work. It's just people need to do the work. We need a diverse spectrum of people doing the work, but we also need people who look like the people who may be against this work doing the work. And so I think it's important to think about that. Funny you mentioned the person from Kenya. That's where I'm from. And I have to say that is something to mention, which is I have noticed that there is a little bit of a divide also on my side of the family, which is so interesting, right? And some of the questions that I get are like, we're blaming people for things that they didn't do, right? Let's, the feelings of people feeling like they're having their fingers pointed at them for systemic issues that they are not a part of. Like, this is just, I was born and people were working like this and now I'm working like this, right? So, I mean, just maybe to close off our questions, if nobody else has another question, this will be our last question. How do you address concerns regarding people feeling like it's not their job to do this work of maybe decolonizing or creating systems of equity? How do you feel how do you address these concerns and how do you feel about them in your work?
Wow, Lisa, yeah, these are retreat length questions. These are awesome. So let me think. I think for me, when I'm talking about foundational messages about what's our shared purpose, what's our mission in an organization, I like to take that back even further and say, what's the brilliant vision that this country was founded on? And it is a long, rugged process to have made the advances we've made. And are you really talking about a society that goes backward relative to withdrawing rights from people? If that's, and I don't believe in that. And so I think for me, it's been just trying to find the place where we can have a conversation about, the both and. How do we both maybe say we're all the same and we want this, to have a unified e pluribus unum, and recognize that that system will not equally support people to thrive and hold people in that both and. Because I think when it goes either or, we either all Americans and don't tell me about that stuff, or we say, no, we're all so different that, there's nothing that unites us. I think that either or is very hard to be in a conversation around because both people feel very threatened versus in what ways is this both about all having a shared venture here in the US and about what it takes to go to the next level of a more just and beloved community, beloved community that King talked about.
It is. Oh my gosh. I'm glad you brought up the Beloved community because it's an amazing website. So y'all, if you want to go Google Martin Luther King Beloved, community, go check that out. It's an amazing opportunity for you to think about how you can build beloved feelings towards your community building, right? Maybe I said that wrong, but yes, go look at the website. You'll learn more there. But I also want to say what you were saying about understanding that when you do this work, you're not just doing it for yourself. It reminds me of a TED Talk. I can't remember who the person is who made this TED Talk or gave this TED Talk. And it's about how when you design systems from a lens of disability, you build better systems for all, everybody,
Yes.
not just the people who need it, right? And it's the same thing here, right? Sometimes we think about when we're talking about being an inclusive leader, we're relegating it to the cores, which may be race and gender and LGBTQI plus and all the things that everybody is talking about in the news, when we're forgetting that there's the whole spectrum of diversity that we need to be inclusive of as well. And we don't create space for that when we say that we're creating division when we talk about DEI. When we're playing small, we're afraid to talk about DEI because it's polarizing. I think we need to lean in. And hopefully y'all agree that this session right here helped us learn more about how we can be inclusive leaders. We're so happy you were here with us, Greg. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lisa. I love your closing comment because you can say DEI lifts all boats around supporting us through our whole life journey. We're all going to get old someday and need support. People have all kinds of diversity and difference right now. I love that point. Thank you for that. And thank you for these great questions and the spirit of the animated strength you bring to this. Thank you.
Well, and thank you, Greg, because you leaned in. Can I just say, I want to give you a round of applause. You all get in their reactions. Give some emojis for Greg because your insights were amazing. You are truly an expert. Your words have truly inspired and enriched me. I feel like some of the questions we hit at you didn't know these questions ahead of time. So I need to point that out to y'all. Greg didn't know these questions ahead of time. So this is really important for me to let you know as fellow DEI optimizing leaders that it's so important to bring people into a space and feel that authenticity. And it's so important to have this, you brought some great ideas, you brought some great perspectives, but for me, I think it was just about carrying it forward. For me, it's all about us having success as inclusive leaders by learning from your perspective, by learning from the learnings you've had from decades of experience. So thank you so much, Greg, for being part of this conversation. And thank you for being the impact that we want to have in 2025. We want to have more inclusive leaders. So we're so excited that you were here.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for including me and all of you for listening and those wonderful floaty icons. I don't know what those are called. Emojis.
Yeah.
So
the little emojis.
Stay strong. Stay strong, folks.
It's all the love. It's all the love. Okay. So as we're closing our session today,